Hello, my name is Ruby Marlowe. At a family banquet, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and polite laughter, my in-laws toasted in German, thinking I wouldn't understand. They called me a burden, useless. I heard every word, and I sat there, silent, at first. But what they didn't know was the company they were celebrating, the one they built their pride around. It had my name on the papers. They erased me from the pictures, rewrote history, smiled for the cameras. But I kept every receipt, and that night, I put them back in their place, with one sentence, one document, and one daughter who finally saw her mother rise. Want to know how a family's quiet betrayal turned into their public undoing? Let me tell you, I didn't understand why they hated me so much until I heard them speak freely in a language they thought I couldn't understand. After lingering by the dessert table long enough to steady my breath, I slipped away toward the restroom. The soft hum of conversation and clinking glasses trailed behind me. When I pushed open the door, the cool tile was a refuge, yet I couldn't stay hidden. There was too much in the air. When I emerged, I walked past the serving area, where a trio of servers in crisp uniforms carried trays of petits fours. I paused, watching Bella laugh at something Indira said in German. I recognized the flow of the words, not enough context yet to be sure. I hesitated, lips pressed together, and my heart thudded. Then I heard it. Sie ist nur eine Last. The words drifted over. She is just a burden. I froze. That voice, soft but sharp. Callista's tone, clipped and amused. Unnütz, someone else said. Useless. My name floated in silence. My throat tightened, but I stayed still, letting the laughter roll over me like cold water. They believed I couldn't understand. I walked back to my seat, each step measured. No tears, no words. My fingers fumbled with the edge of my wine glass. I felt sweat at my temples, a tremble in my hands. Yet on the outside, I sat upright, composed. Bella caught my eye. He offered a forced smile. I nodded curtly, letting nothing show. I saw Indira's face shift just a fraction, a flicker of fear, or maybe merely surprise. Across the room, guests raised their glasses. Bella, Callista, Indira, the triumvirate in the spotlight, clinked their stems together. I followed their motion, lifting my glass but tasting nothing. The wine felt like betrayal in my mouth. I thought, so this is how it is. You erase me in English and bury me in German. I forced a calm smile and let it rest on my lips. To family, Bella said, and the room united in applause. My heart tightened. Family, he said. But which family? Minutes passed like hours. I sat quietly, my mind working. Every flash of laughter, every phrase I caught, I catalogued in my memory. I had learned German in college, not for elegance, not for show, but because language matters. Because understanding is power. When I excused myself to the restroom again, I lingered in the mirror. My reflection looked strained, eyes lined, chin firm. I washed my face, splashed water, let the coolness flush me. Back in the ballroom, passing by an elderly guest at the edge of the room, I overheard them whisper, "She speaks German, don't you think?" I froze again. This time, not from fear, from recognition. I didn't deny it. I didn't move. They looked at me. I met their gaze, and I knew everything had changed. I didn't understand why they hated me so deeply, why every smile seemed edged with calculation, why my very presence felt like a stain on their perfectly polished gatherings, until the moment I heard them speak freely, in a language they thought I couldn't understand. It happened after I lingered by the dessert table longer than I should have, pretending to study the neat rows of petit fours and sugared tarts. My hands were trembling, though I pressed them firmly against my clutch bag to still them. The noise of the gala surrounded me, soft conversation like a tide, the polite clinking of crystal glasses, the faint swell of a string quartet tucked into the far corner of the ballroom. My chest rose and fell too quickly, so I slipped away, following the gilded signs toward the restrooms. The door opened easily, and I stepped inside, greeted by the cool embrace of marble tile and quiet air. For a moment, the restroom felt like refuge, a place where the noise couldn't follow me. I leaned against the counter, watching my reflection blur in the mirror, trying to calm the storm gathering inside me. My pulse steadied only slightly. I couldn't hide here forever, and I knew it. When I emerged, the contrast was sharp, the warmth of the ballroom pressing against me again, the music floating like perfume, the voices weaving into patterns of laughter. I moved past the serving area, where servers in crisp black uniforms balanced trays of desserts, their motions practiced and precise. My gaze drifted almost unwillingly toward the head table. There was Bella, standing close to Indira, his shoulders shaking with laughter at something she had just said. Her voice was low, the words carrying a rhythm I recognized immediately. Not English, not the language of the toast. German. My lips pressed tightly together, my heart thudded, each beat like a warning drum. I recognized the flow of the syllables, fragments reached me, but not enough context, not yet. I hesitated in place, half hidden behind a column, listening. Then I heard it, clear, sharp, undeniable. Sie ist nur eine Last. She is just a burden. The words cut through the air like a blade, and I froze where I stood. The voice belonged to Callista. I knew her cadence, the clipped elegance of her tone, the way her amusement always carried a thread of cruelty. She hadn't lowered her voice much, confident that her choice of language shielded her. Another voice joined in, smooth, dismissive. Unnütz. Useless. And though my name wasn't spoken, it floated there in the silence, hanging heavy, filling the spaces between their laughter. My throat tightened, heat crawling up the back of my neck. For a moment, I felt myself shrink, every part of me folding in on itself. But then I stilled, forcing my breath into rhythm. I stood absolutely still, letting the laughter wash over me like a cold tide. They believed I couldn't understand. They thought their cruelty could hide behind the curtain of another language. When I finally walked back to my seat, every step was deliberate, measured, my spine held straight. I let no one see the tremor in my hands, though sweat gathered at my temples. My fingers fumbled briefly against the stem of my wineglass as I sat down. I held it tightly, as if gripping it would steady me. Across the room, Bela caught my eye. For a flicker of a moment, he seemed uncertain, as though he had seen something in my expression he didn't recognize. He forced a smile, thin and unconvincing. I responded with the briefest nod, curt, controlled, letting nothing escape. Indira's gaze swept across the room, pausing for the barest second on me. Something flickered in her eyes, not guilt, not remorse, something closer to fear. Or perhaps just surprise. Then, as though nothing had happened, the spectacle continued. Guests raised their glasses, voices mingling in cheer. Bela, Callista, and Indira, the triumvirate at the center of the room, clinked their glasses together, laughter still humming between them. I followed suit, lifting my own glass in mimicry, though my throat clenched when the rim touched my lips. The wine tasted sour, bitter, like betrayal. So this is how it is, I thought. You erase me in English and bury me in German. I forced a smile, practiced and calm, and let it rest on my lips like armor. To family, Bella said loudly, and the room erupted in applause, voices warm and unified. My heart tightened at the word. Family. Whose family? Certainly not mine. The minutes dragged like hours. Each tick of the clock on the far wall seemed louder than the music itself. I sat in silence, cataloging every phrase, every flash of laughter, every sneer hidden inside foreign syllables. I had studied German in college, not for elegance, not for travel or sophistication, but because I believed words mattered. I believed understanding opened doors. I had never known that one day it would be the blade I carried quietly, a weapon forged in years of grammar lessons and translation exercises. Understanding was power. When I excused myself again, I moved toward the restroom once more, but lingered longer this time at the mirror. My reflection startled me, eyes lined with exhaustion, chin lifted with resolve. I splashed cold water on my face, letting it wash away the heat of humiliation. My skin tingled, my heartbeat steadied. On my way back through the ballroom, I passed near the edge of the room where older guests sat, quieter, away from the noise. One leaned toward another, their voices hushed, but not hushed enough. "She speaks German, don't you think?" one murmured, lips close to the rim of a glass. The words struck me like lightning. I froze, not out of fear this time, but recognition. Confirmation. I didn't move. I didn't deny it. Slowly, I turned my head, and my eyes met theirs. The silence between us stretched. My gaze didn't falter, and in that instant, everything shifted. The secret they thought they shared was no longer theirs alone. The shield of language, the safety of assumed ignorance, it was gone. They knew it. And I knew it. Everything had changed. At first, I thought I had misheard, that maybe the words had blurred together in the noise of the ballroom. But then the woman seated beside me leaned closer, her perfume sharp, her voice lower than a whisper. She repeated the phrase word for word, confirming everything I had feared I'd caught correctly. The murmurs of the hall continued, laughter tumbling like champagne bubbles, but inside my chest, silence pressed down like stone. After the applause for Callista's grand introduction settled, I excused myself, sliding quietly from my chair without drawing attention. My heels clicked lightly against the polished floor as I moved past clusters of guests who were still laughing, their heads tilted toward one another, unconcerned. I walked swiftly, urgently, until I found a side hallway where the noise dimmed. There, a mirrored panel caught my reflection. My face looked pale, too pale, as though the lights of the gala had drained me. I pressed a hand against my lips, holding back the rising storm inside me. Every German word I had heard replayed in my head, carved into memory like accusations etched into stone. Last burden, useless. That night, Bella came home as though the evening had been nothing unusual. He set his briefcase down gently on the entry table, his shoes polished, his tie loosened only slightly. He kissed my cheek with mechanical affection, the gesture of someone playing a part. "Tough night?" I asked, my voice steady but probing. He nodded, gave a polite smile. But there was no return question. No, "And how was it for you?" No recognition of the humiliation that clung to me like smoke. I stood there, waiting, and realized with a sharp pang that I couldn't remember the last time he had asked how I was. The absence of the invitation, of acknowledgement, weighed heavier than any insult whispered in German. After dinner, I retreated to my study. The desk lamp glowed softly, casting a golden pool of light over the papers stacked neatly before me. Spreadsheets, tax returns, donor receipts, files I had long since memorized. My laptop pinged with a notification. I clicked it open. Board meeting notes uploaded, but no invite, no agenda, no copy had been sent to me. My pulse quickened. Something was wrong. I opened archived emails, scrolling quickly, scanning subject lines. There was nothing. No reminders, no invitations, no official notice. My name, once a fixture in every set of meeting minutes, had vanished. A space where my contributions used to exist now lay barren. I shut the screen with a snap, my mind already calculating. Tomorrow morning, I would ask Bella casually over breakfast. Why didn't I get the notice? Morning came with stale coffee and tension thick as fog. Bella sat at the table, reading the paper, as though the world hadn't shifted. I slid my leather-bound journal across the table toward him, my voice measured. I noticed the board meeting was held without my input. He glanced up, lifted his cup, and sipped calmly. "It was procedural," he said. "You weren't listed as an active stakeholder anymore." The words struck like ice. My stomach twisted. "Did I sign anything to remove my stake?" I asked. He shifted slightly in his chair, his eyes narrowing for only a fraction of a second. "It was handled through legal," he said. "I thought you knew." I stared at him. My fork lay untouched against my plate. I had never signed anything. The rest of the day, their faces at the party haunted me. Indira's smooth smile, Callista's clipped voice, Bela's forced grin. Something had shifted beneath me, a foundation pulled out while I was still standing on it. Later that afternoon, I drove across town to a boutique owned by an old classmate, Marisol. She greeted me warmly, her shop fragrant with leather and lavender sachets. As we spoke, she tilted her head and said, I saw the press release about your company's new leadership. Congratulations to your team. But I thought you started it with Bella, too. Odd to see you missing from the announcement. Her words burned like salt against a wound. A press release. My mind reeled. Callista's polished photo, Indira's approving quote, Bella's name in bold, and me, gone. My contributions erased. But I remembered. I remembered the ink smudges on my hands when I filed the original LLC paperwork myself. I remembered bending over the dining table late into the night, drafting the articles of incorporation in my handwriting. I remembered the signatures on the first fiscal reports. My signature, not theirs. By the time I returned home, the truth pulsed in my chest like a warning drum. I went to the storage cabinet in my home office, pulling out dusty binders and thick folders. My hands shook slightly as I searched, until at last I found it. A folder labeled in black ink, Marlowe Thornton, LLC, Founding Documents, 2016. I laid the folder flat on my desk and opened it. Inside were the articles of organization, the initial capital contributions, the bank authorization forms, each bearing my handwriting, my name, co-founder, co-owner. My identity was not a memory. It was ink on paper, signed, dated, witnessed. But somewhere, someone had manipulated the trail. My name had been omitted from announcements. The registry had been altered. Legal documents had been twisted. My existence methodically erased. I sat in silence, the air heavy, the lamp buzzing faintly overhead. Then a decision formed, solid and certain. Not confrontation, not yet. Preparation. I scanned every page, careful to save digital copies in multiple locations. I photographed each document, uploaded backups to a secure drive, and organized the evidence into a folder clearly labeled Protected. Then I opened my email and began drafting a message to Lumen, a trusted friend and corporate lawyer. My words were precise. I need you to verify something for me. I believe my legal ownership was quietly removed without my consent. I reread it twice, making sure my tone was clear, but not frantic. Then I saved it as a draft. As dusk gathered outside, the last light slipping away behind the mountains, I closed the folder carefully and slid it back into its place. My chest rose with something sharp and unyielding. If they thought they could erase me on paper, they hadn't learned who I really was. If they thought my silence meant consent, they had mistaken quiet for surrender. I traced my fingers over the embossed letters of my name on the folder's cover, Marlowe Thornton. If they erased me in ink, I would bring myself back in ink. Stronger, louder, unignorable. I knew I needed help. Someone who could see what I saw. Someone who could read between the lines as naturally as I did. Someone who wouldn't be fooled by polished statements or carefully edited clips. That evening, after the sun dipped behind the Rockies and the mountain peaks faded into indigo shadows, the house cooled into silence. My daughter had fallen asleep upstairs. Her door cracked just enough for me to hear the faint rhythm of her breathing. Bella was out, somewhere between business and excuses. I sat in the living room alone, the laptop balanced on my knees, its glow cutting through the dimness. The title of the company's newest video filled the screen. Our Journey, a Decade of Growth. I hesitated before pressing play. The video opened with a swell of nostalgic music, violins carrying a false warmth. Images of ribbon cuttings filled the frame, fundraising dinners, champagne toasts, gala moments of laughter frozen in perfect lighting. And always, at the center, was Callista. Her face tilted toward cameras, her voice ringing in speeches, her figure applauded under chandeliers. Guests raised their glasses, confetti fluttered in edited slow motion, and still, no trace of me. Then came the montage, behind-the-scenes meetings, marketing campaigns, color-coded charts, PowerPoint slides I had designed in the quiet of my study, lit only by the glow of my desk lamp. Late-night brainstorming sessions distilled into 2-second clips labeled Our Team Led by Callista. But nowhere was my name, nowhere was my face. Not in a photo, not in a caption, not even in a fleeting shot of my hands typing, my pen sketching, my voice on a call. When the credits rolled under key contributors, my name was absent altogether. I leaned forward, heart pounding hard enough to rattle me. My throat felt tight. The screen flickered to a shot of Callista receiving a bouquet of flowers, the words superimposed, "For her visionary leadership." My stomach lurched. I recognized the arrangement instantly, the curling sprigs, the layered roses. I had designed it myself. My layout flashed next, slides I had built with care, though the narration claimed, "We envisioned growth. We shaped donor relations. We built the image." Every word belonged to her. Humiliation rose like bile. It wasn't enough they pushed me to the sidelines in meetings or buried my contributions in conversations. They had siphoned off my work, repackaged it, and erased me completely from the story. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe past the ache, but I couldn't pull away. Every frame burned deeper. Later that night, Bella and I sat across from one another at the dining table. The only light came from a candle flickering low, casting uneven shadows across his face. He pushed a plate toward me, his gesture stiff, rehearsed. "Why am I not in the video?" I asked. My voice was quiet, stripped of accusation, carrying only the weight of fact. He looked over his shoulder, pausing as though rehearsing an answer, then turned back with a face carefully composed. "We needed a consistent image," he said. "People can't see everything. It gets confusing." Confusing. That was his explanation for my disappearance. I felt the silence swell inside me, heavy and unyielding. What could I say to that? That I was not a shadow. That I was the one who built the very foundation they now stood on. I stared at him, tasting something cold and metallic at the back of my throat. He didn't flinch. From the hallway, my daughter appeared, rubbing her eyes. She must have heard the tension in our voices. She looked from me to Bella, her small brow furrowed. I reached instinctively for the silver locket around my neck, the one that had belonged to my grandmother. Its surface was worn from years of touch, her name engraved delicately on the back. It was the one piece I considered sacred, untouchable. I unclasped it and held it out to her. The candlelight caught on its silver curve as I placed it into her palm. Her fingers curled around it protectively. "This is yours now," I whispered. "Someday, you'll know what to do with it." Her eyes glimmered with curiosity, though she didn't fully understand. She held it close to her chest, nodding solemnly. In that moment, clarity struck me. This fight wasn't just for me anymore. It was for her, for what she would inherit. Not the locket, but the truth of who her mother was, of what her mother refused to lose. After she returned to bed, I retreated to my study. I pulled an old photo album from the shelf, the leather cover cracked, its corners bent from years of use. I flipped through pages, wedding shots, early campaign meetings, donor dinners. My stomach tightened with every page. Again and again, I saw myself seated at the edges, half-shadowed, cropped just out of frame, sometimes deliberately cut away. My name tagged in nobody's caption, my words missing from every recording. I picked up my pen and opened my journal. I wrote in firm strokes, "Visibility isn't always victory, but silence isn't safety." When I finished the sentence, I stared at it, letting the words sear into me. Then I closed the journal and pulled up my contacts. The glow of my phone illuminated a familiar name, an old friend, someone who used to tease me about how much I loved the fine print of contracts, how I found poetry in legal clauses. A lawyer now, someone who lived in the world of shadows and understood how to chase them into the light. I typed the number, hesitated only a moment, then pressed call. When the line clicked and her voice answered, I steadied mine. "I need someone who understands legal shadows," I said. There was silence, then a low, serious reply. "Tell me everything." And just like that, I stepped back into the light. One clause, one document, one piece of truth at a time. And just like that, I stepped back into the light, one clause at a time. The next morning carried a weight that felt different from any day before. My nerves had steadied into resolve, thick and unmovable, like concrete setting in the cold dawn. No more trembling, no more second-guessing. It wasn't anger alone that pushed me forward now. It was clarity. Lumen's office sat on the 10th floor of a stone building downtown, glass walls reflecting the pale Colorado sky. Inside, her shelves were lined with blue legal binders, each stamped with neat labels. Framed degrees hung in symmetrical rows behind her desk, proof of her meticulous discipline. She greeted me with the kind of smile that was both warm and sharp, offering me a seat in a deep leather chair. "Coffee?" she asked, her tone professional but not unkind. I nodded, my voice lower than usual. "Please." Once we both had steaming cups, I laid everything out. The video, the missing invitations, the erased credits, the sudden silences in my inbox where notices used to arrive like clockwork. I spoke until my throat felt dry, each detail adding weight to the table between us. Her brows knit together as she listened. When I finished, she leaned back slightly, folding her hands. "So, you believe official records were altered behind the scenes? If you're right, that's not just corporate maneuvering, it's legally serious." I met her eyes, unflinching. "They left traces. I've seen them. Dates misaligned, email headers spliced, agendas uploaded but never sent to me, even meeting minutes edited to erase my presence." She opened a binder, flipping briskly through empty divider tabs she kept for notes. "If you want me to pursue this, I can dig into the audit logs, cross-compare digital signatures, see who touched what and when. But it has to stay quiet, off the record. If anyone suspects too soon, they'll cover their tracks more carefully." My response came without hesitation. "Do it." The day stretched long inside that office. Hours blurred as we sat surrounded by files, charts, and my own stacks of documents. Together, we combed through ownership splits, archived board minutes, donor acknowledgements. Each page whispered clues. Discrepancies surfaced like cracks in stone. In one file, a board vote dated January 12th appeared weeks before the meeting had even been scheduled. In another affidavit, my signature was missing entirely. On a funding agreement I distinctly remembered signing in pen. We flipped back and forth between copies, and there it was. Two versions of the same document, one authentic, one doctored. Lumen's exhale broke the silence. They weren't careful. They left fingerprints, lots of them. That evening, back home, I turned on the company's live stream of a leadership event. My laptop screen filled with images of chandeliers, round tables, faces glowing under stage lights. Their new tagline flashed boldly in gold across the screen. "Building the future, honoring our legacy." Callista stood center stage in an ivory suit, hair swept back with precision. She spoke to the crowd with a confidence so polished it gleamed. "We commit to transparency and continuity," she declared, her smile broad, her gestures graceful. I leaned forward, elbows pressed into my knees, listening carefully. Every word rang hollow to me, rehearsed and brittle, though the audience drank it in like gospel. Then her tone shifted. "Today, I will officially assume public leadership of the firm, overseeing all strategic direction and outreach moving forward." A hush rippled across the audience. Cameras panned, capturing her poised smile. She raised her glass. "To the next chapter." The room erupted in applause. Comment streams filled the right side of my screen. "Elegant, visionary, the face of tomorrow. Next generation leadership." Not a single line credited the hands that built those tomorrows. Not a single comment remembered mine. I leaned back slowly, breath steady, fingers curled around the remote as though gripping a blade. I did not laugh. I did not cry. I barely moved. A sly tension threaded through me instead, because now I knew the fractures beneath their glassy veneer. They might dazzle the world, but I carried the proof of the cracks. That night, I crossed the hallway into Bella's home office. His laptop sat half-closed on the desk, its charging light blinking like a heartbeat. His papers were stacked neatly, untouched. The air smelled faintly of his cologne, mingled with paper dust. I didn't touch anything. I didn't need to. I lifted the receiver of the desk phone, dialed his voicemail. My voice was calm, measured, stripped of emotion. "You may want to review Clause 6C in the shareholder bylaws," I said evenly. "It becomes actionable Friday." I hung up. No anger, no raised tones. It was not a threat. It was a boundary, clear, sharp, undeniable. Morning came. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. No reply, no acknowledgement, just silence, but silence can be louder than words. I felt it settle in the air between us, heavy, thick with meaning. And in that quiet, I realized something important. For the first time in months, I didn't feel erased. I felt dangerous. If they thought I was bluffing, then they had clearly forgotten who wrote the original rules. The charity banquet shimmered with the kind of false grandeur that photographs well but feels hollow in person. Gold-trimmed drapery framed the ballroom, and chandeliers spilled light across round tables set with polished silver and crystal flutes. Guests mingled at the entrance, pearls and cufflinks flashing under the glow. I lingered at the doorway for a heartbeat, inhaled deeply, and straightened my posture. Tonight, I refused to shrink into the margins they had prepared for me. Indira stood at the head table, tall and elegant, greeting donors with a warmth as polished as the glasses she clinked. But when she turned to acknowledge me, her lips formed no words, no introduction, not even a title, just a polite nod, the kind one gives to a stranger who has wandered too close. I felt the shift ripple outward as heads turned. Conversations paused, eyes flicked toward me and then away, as though my presence carried a stain. A woman behind me, her perfume heavy with lilac, muttered under her breath, "She's here again?" The words struck like a stone. But I walked forward anyway, chin lifted, stride even. I would not give them the satisfaction of hesitation. My heels tapped against marble in defiance of the whispers that curled through the air. The program began in a swell of strings. Indira took the podium, her voice clear, her accent refined. She spoke of visionary leadership, of familial devotion, of a legacy carried forward. I sat at a side table near the edge of the room, linen smooth beneath my fingers, my hands flat and still against it. Plates were set down before us in quiet procession. I lifted mine without a word, cutting into the meal mechanically while Callista laughed at her table, her glass clinking again and again like a bell of affirmation. The pattern was obvious. Exclusion layered upon exclusion, each act small enough to pass as circumstance, together loud enough to crush. Halfway through the meal, Indira rose again for a toast. Her voice shifted languages, German flowing sharp and deliberate across the room. Denjenigen, die nur nehmen und nichts zurückgeben. To those who only take and never give back. A ripple of chuckles followed, glasses clinked. Callista smirked over her shoulder. I stiffened. The phrase landed heavier than any direct insult. My work, my loyalty, my sacrifices, all dismissed, recast as greed. My daughter, seated beside me, sensed the weight in the air. She reached out, her small hand resting lightly on mine. That single touch steadied me more than the toast ever could. I swallowed the heat rising in my chest. They thought their language was a shield, but I had learned it long ago. Their insult was no secret. It was a message carved into the air. I did not belong. After dinner, I slipped away before dessert trays emerged, my exit quiet but deliberate. I crossed the parking lot alone, the night air cold against my skin, station lights guiding me through nearly empty streets. When I reached home, I locked the door behind me and went straight to the study. The safe in the corner waited, metal cool beneath my fingertips as I turned the dial. Inside, stacked neatly, were the documents that told my true story. Founding papers, bank authorizations, contracts with my signature written clear and strong across the bottom. I lifted them out one by one, spreading them across my desk like cards in a hand no one else had expected me to play. At the bottom of the pile sat an envelope, its edges frayed from age. My father's handwriting slanted across the front. I hadn't touched it in years. With careful hands, I opened the seal. Inside, a note in his familiar script. You carry our name. Never let others redraw it. Tears pressed at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back. I was beyond tears now. Tears were for grief. This was for battle. I began to work. Legal notices drafted, evidence copied, scanned, backed up in triplicate. The silent partnership document surfaced, Bela's forgotten signature on it, binding and undeniable. An agreement he had tucked away and underestimated. Every page became ammunition, every file a brick in the wall I was rebuilding around myself. When the package was complete, I set it aside and reached for my planner. Tomorrow, I would meet with a journalist, not a gossip columnist, not a friendly blogger, but someone with integrity, someone willing to follow the paper trail and ask questions no one at the gala dared to raise. I had never imagined taking my story to the public, but necessity had stripped away hesitation. They had left me no other path. Before leaving my study, I picked up my phone and typed one final message to Bella. My thumb hovered only a second before pressing send. The next time your mother insults me in German, I'll respond, in court. No flourish, no dramatic punctuation, just fact. The text delivered, unread. It sat there like a stone on the path, waiting to be tripped over. Across town, in another gilded room, Callista's phone pinged. She opened a notification. Document access request denied, insufficient clearance. Her jaw tightened. She dialed quickly, her voice sharp and low. She's making moves, she whispered into the receiver. I closed my eyes in the quiet of my study. For once, I didn't feel like I had to prove myself to them, to claw my way into a seat they never intended for me. This wasn't about convincing them anymore. It was about reclaiming what had always been mine, and this time, I would not be erased. What they didn't understand was this: I wasn't playing defense anymore. I stepped into the banquet hall without announcement, without introduction. The air changed the moment the doors opened. The lights were lower than usual, stage draped in burgundy and gold, velvet curtains pooling like spilled wine at the edges. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead, scattering fractured light across sequined dresses and polished shoes. Conversation faltered. Forks paused against porcelain plates. Faces turned. Bella's expression flickered, his practiced composure breaking for a split second. Callista's lips tightened, her jaw locked as if she'd bitten into something sour. Indira's posture stiffened, her shoulders drawn back, a veneer of control cracking at the edges. I did not flinch. I did not stammer. I lifted my chin and offered a steady nod, the kind that carried no apology. For a long breath, silence stretched like a taut rope, humming in the air. Then, slowly, the sound of whispers seeped back into the room. But the air was different now. Weighted. Curious. Anticipating. I walked forward, not rushed, not hesitant. Each step measured, heels striking the marble floor with precision. I made no effort to blend into the crowd, no attempt to disappear. I was not background tonight. Every breath I drew in was deliberate, every exhale grounded. I moved toward the front table, toward the head of the room where the spotlight burned the brightest. When I reached the lectern, I paused. The MC's voice, mid-sentence, faltered and trailed into silence. Eyes shifted from him to me, an unspoken transfer of attention. My pulse beat steady in my ears, but my voice, when it came, was even. Before we toast, I said, cutting through the air, I need to clarify something. A ripple moved across the audience. Chairs creaked as people adjusted, leaning forward, curious. Some frowned, others held their breath. I unzipped my clutch slowly, the sound deliberate, slicing through the hush. From inside, I drew out 2 thick envelopes, bulging with paper, sealed with tabs and labels, legal documents, affidavits, company records, proof. I placed them squarely on the white linen of the table, the thud echoing louder than it should have in the stillness. Gasps broke across the room. I looked first at Callista. Her eyes widened, then darted left and right, as if searching for an escape route. I turned my gaze deliberately to Bela, his face drained of color. Indira's hand flew instinctively to her throat, her pearl necklace trembling against her skin. Finally, I let my eyes sweep across the crowd and land on the cameras at the far end of the room. This company? I said, my voice steady as glass. It has always been mine. The words sliced through the quiet, firm, and irrefutable. A sharp intake of breath echoed behind me. A few whispers turned into murmurs, swelling into a restless current. The tension in the air was electric, charged, impossible to ignore. I opened one of the envelopes with a flick, sliding out a notarized letter from the firm's attorney. My hands did not shake as I held it up. The letter confirmed what I had always known. My name as primary owner, majority stakeholder, signatures intact, dates validated. Every mark legitimate, authenticated. I slid it forward across the table for all to see. Silence has limits, I continued, voice calm but carrying. Mine expired last week. Disbelief radiated across the room. Some gasped aloud. Others rose halfway out of their seats, unsure whether to flee or applaud. The audience splintered into fragments of confusion and revelation. Cameras flashed like lightning against storm clouds. And then, another sound. From the back of the hall, my daughter stood. Her small figure glowed in the dim light as she raised her phone, the screen already recording. With one calm tap, she pressed publish. Within seconds, a video began to play across the projection screens behind the stage. The audio filled the hall. Indira's voice, Callista's voice, German words sliding sharp and mocking across the speakers. Sie ist nur eine Last, unnütz. Subtitles scrolled beneath. She's a burden, useless. The room froze. Forks clattered onto plates. Guests exchanged glances, startled. Phones vibrated across the tables as notifications poured in. Screens lit up everywhere, feeds exploding with the video already spreading. Sponsors whispered urgently to one another. A senator's aide scribbled notes so fast the paper nearly tore. The carefully painted image of Callista and Indira unraveled in seconds. On stage, Callista's composure cracked. She turned sharply to Bella, her voice a hiss caught by the nearest microphone. "You planned this." I did not raise my voice. I did not lean forward. I answered simply, without anger, with the clarity of truth. "I warned you," repeatedly. The first applause began timidly, a few claps from the back, then more. It grew, spreading forward like a wave. People rose from their seats. The sound swelled, no longer hesitant, but bold. Indira tried to intercede, stepping forward, her voice quivering into a microphone. "There has been a misunderstanding," but her words drowned beneath the clamor. Bella attempted to protest, his hand raised, but his voice faltered, his authority evaporated. He looked not like a leader, but like a man exposed. I stood steady, unmoved, letting the moment stretch, letting the truth breathe. I had waited years for silence to crack. Now it did, loudly, in public, inescapably. The projection screen glitched briefly, then resumed, replaying the insults again and again. Each repetition cut deeper into their facade. I inhaled slowly, exhaled calmly, and in that breath I realized something important. This was no longer about revenge. It was about reclaiming what had always been mine, about identity, about the truth written in ink, spoken in languages they thought I couldn't understand, and now broadcast for the world to hear. And this time, there would be no erasing me. I didn't need to say another word, because now the world was watching. When morning broke, my phone already trembled like it had weathered a storm overnight. Notifications stacked across the screen in relentless waves. Emails of support, text messages from friends who had seen the footage, tweets quoting Callista's hollow banquet speeches. Headlines lit up my lock screen one after another, each bolder than the last. One read, "Ruby Marlowe exposes family deception at gala." Another, "Banquet scandal rocks Thornton legacy." I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling while the city stirred awake outside. The hum of early traffic seeped through the window. My daughter's favorite ceramic mug, painted with clumsy daisies, sat half full of yesterday's tea on the nightstand. Beside it, my phone continued to blink. Bella's name on the missed call list. The red badge marked one new voicemail. I didn't open it. Not yet. Not when silence felt more powerful than any words I could give him. By mid-morning, my lawyer and friend Lumen called. Her voice was brisk but tinged with awe. "Ruby," she said, "there's a retraction draft from Indira's legal team. She's offering to vacate her advisory seat in the firm. Officially." My knees went weak. I sank into my desk chair, letting the words settle. A clause. A concession. Thin as parchment. But it meant something undeniable. They were bending. Lumens sent over the attached note, handwritten in Indira's sharp scrawl. I never thought you'd have the spine. For the first time in years, her words didn't pierce me. They exposed her. That single sentence betrayed everything. Her arrogance, her disbelief that I could ever rise. And yet here I was, her power faltering under the weight of daylight. By noon, news anchors held up screenshots of the retraction next to the banquet video. The contrast was stark. Her once polished, untouchable image now cracked in high definition, scandal bleeding into every frame. Commentators debated her future. Donors whispered about withdrawing support, and always the footage played again. Callista's sneer, Indira's laughter, their German insults now subtitled in English for the world to see. In the quiet of my kitchen that afternoon, I prepared my own statement. Not rushed, not reactionary. I sat at the wooden table, my daughter's drawings magneted to the refrigerator behind me, crayon suns and stick figure families. On the counter, my grandmother's silver locket lay face down, engraving hidden, waiting. I began on a yellow legal pad, scribbling lines until the ink smudged under my fingers. Then I transferred the words into a typed draft, refining them, stripping away anger until only truth remained. I spoke of betrayal, yes, but also of integrity, of what it means to build something from nothing and watch it be stolen, of the difference between ambition and greed. Finally, I recorded it myself. My voice, calm but unwavering. Dignity is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. Legacy belongs to those who labor for it, not those who erase. I sent the video to trusted outlets. By evening, it spread across screens. Notifications lit up again, but this time they carried warmth. Friends, strangers, even old colleagues from years past wrote to me. You said what so many of us felt, but never spoke. The words became more than mine. They became a chorus. That night, Lumen delivered the final blow. She arrived at my doorstep with a sealed envelope. Inside were official documents, the firm's registry, corrected and restored, submitted quietly but legally. My name reinstated as majority owner. My status undeniable. Callista stripped of campaign authority. Indira pushed into retirement. Bella cornered, facing the choice between stepping aside or watching the courts dismantle him piece by piece. I held the papers in my hands, the weight of every affidavit, every signature pressing into my palms. For the first time, the evidence didn't feel like a burden. It felt like armor. I thought of my daughter upstairs, clutching the silver locket I had given her. A smile tugged at my lips, one that surprised me with its softness. This wasn't just victory. This was justice. The next day, I drove to the corporate office one last time. The halls felt muted, stripped of the bustling arrogance that once filled them. Fewer assistants lingered, fewer whispers followed. I walked past the reception desk without pause, my heels striking the floor in steady rhythm. At my old workstation, I pulled open the drawer. Inside lay my favorite pen, worn smooth from years of use, and a framed photograph of my grandmother, her gaze stern but kind. I packed them gently into a small box. The rest I left behind. When I stepped back into the doorway, my daughter was waiting. She stood tall for her age, the silver locket shining against her sweater in the hallway light. She looked up at me, her voice quiet but clear. You taught me what real power looks like. I placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying myself as much as her. Outside, the flash of news cameras cut across the steps. Reporters called out questions, microphones extended like weapons. My phone buzzed endlessly in my bag, vibrating with demands for answers, reactions, sound bites. I didn't turn it on. I took a breath, filling my lungs with the sharp Colorado air. And I smiled, not because I had won some hollow game, but because I had chosen to stop playing by someone else's script. For the first time, the story was mine again, but healing doesn't always mean forgetting. And some wounds don't leave quietly. Morning light filtered through the sheer curtains. I sat on my front porch, holding a warm mug of coffee, inhaling the autumn air. Silence greeted me. My phone lay face down on the table, unused. Polarizing headlines faded from my timeline. trending tags replaced by voices of support and quiet respect. The world outside felt calmer today. I watched as neighbors walked dogs, children boarded school buses, leaves drifted across lawns. In the lull, I felt something settle inside me, a fragile peace. It was unfamiliar, but it was mine. Later in the morning, I found a letter slid under my door. Bella's handwriting. My pulse fluttered as I opened it. Not an apology. Not regret, only an explanation. He wrote of pressures from Indira, from public perception, of believing that the family legacy needed a face they trusted. He insisted miscommunication and expectations had warped into this mess. He ended, "I never meant to erase you, but I came to believe they were building without me, too." I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer etched unfinished. Closure doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it's a decision to stop asking for what you deserve and begin giving yourself what you need. Midday, I responded to a consulting invitation, an opportunity with a women-led startup in Denver. They reached out after reading my statement. I accepted. I would no longer work to be seen by them. I would build for those who believe in equity, integrity, and silent strength. That afternoon, I walked my daughter to her school. A crisp breeze lifted golden strands of her hair. She was excited about her part in the school play. I stood backstage, the wooden floor warmed by lights, watching her take the stage. The silver locket I'd given her glinted softly under the spotlight. Her voice cracked slightly, then grew confident. When she acknowledged the audience, she looked at me, eyes shining. Later, I returned home to write in my journal. The lamp cast an amber glow. I found a clean page. My pen hovered. I wrote, "Some battles you win on paper. Others you win by refusing to disappear." I closed the journal, pressed my palm over it, breathing steady. Outside, dusk stretched thin. I turned off the porch light, walked inside. My daughter slept upstairs. I paused at the door, looking at the framed photo of my grandmother, the old locket around her neck now in my daughter's hands. The world had changed, not because I shouted louder, but because I stopped shrinking. Justice isn't always loud. But dignity, once reclaimed, echoes forever. Sometimes, justice doesn't roar. It whispers through quiet courage and well-placed truth. Ruby's story reminds us that staying silent to keep the peace can come at too high a cost. Have you ever kept quiet to protect others, only to realize it was costing you your peace? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, raw, real, and rooted in emotional truth, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come, and I'd love to have you along for the journey.